Welcome back, sewists. We have a very simple project that uses very little fabric today. This is my first project back since I lost my mom over about a month ago. So I'm doing something small and easy and also something for someone else. I have a friend who is a doctor, and months ago we were discussing their scrub hats, and they have one hat in particular that they love. It's a very basic style, but the inside of the hat is has a lining of terry cloth, like toweling on the inside. And so I've got some pictures, we took some measurements, and I went online and I found a free scrub hat pattern. There's actually a lot out there. So if you're looking for scrub hat for people with long hair, like there's a lot of options. This is the most basic, almost pillbox style with the bias that ties in the back that's kind of adjustable. You could even slip some elastic in there, and I'm going to talk to you about some ideas when we get ready to sew. So I've printed it out. It will be linked below. It is by Doretta Davies. It says Doretta Davies Free Scrub Hat Pattern. It's just two printed pieces of paper. This is the one for metrics. This is the one that's in inches. What I did, somebody has stolen all of my tape dispensers. I have two of them, they are gone. I'm gonna have to order another one. No one knows what they did with it, but they're not where they belong. And I couldn't tape these together. I was looking for my glue stick, and then I thought, why don't I just sew this together? I actually saw someone on Instagram, I think, sewing together their pattern pieces like this. Well, I can tell you it's not my first choice to do, but it worked fine. And since I'm going to trace over it anyway, if you do this, you need to make sure you do a very long stitch because it will tear along the dotted line if you don't. And when you go to cut it apart, like if you're cutting this out, it will start to come apart where it's stitched on the edges. Even if you backstitch, you're more likely to have some tearage. So it's a cute and fun idea. It worked for this application, but probably wouldn't do it every time. So I have already got it traced off here. This just needs a half a yard of fabric. I am going to use my rotary mat because I'm going to be making a whole bunch at once. So I went to Hobby Lobby. They had their 40% off sale, and they have terry cloth, which is just, it's toweling. You can use this for baby products. There's so many things you can use this for. For us today, on the side band piece, we're going to cut one for each piece out of this toweling or terry cloth, and then the other one will be cut out of the fashion fabric. It has a top piece, and we're going to cut two of those out of our fashion fabric. Let me show you what I bought, and one of these I'm not going to use after having a discussion. I went and bought fabric without discussing it with them. I was just sort of guessing a little bit, and we have got our golf balls and golf tees. We've got a Christmassy one that just looks like Christmas candy. All of these are from Hobby Lobby. And then I have the hot rod flames. And then I bought one that's, I just think is so cute, and it's just a bandana fabric. However, I have been told no red bandanas at work because of the area they live in. I don't know enough about it, but I do know this will not be used. I'm going to put this in my pile of things that I use when I extend pockets in my pants. If you've not seen that video, it looks like this. I think it's called No More Shallow Pockets. Women's pockets are too short. I'm always, if I buy pants like these that I'm wearing today, and I just got these, the pocket ends right here. So my phone barely, like every time I bend over, the phone just comes out because it's not deep enough. And I have a video on how to extend those pockets. This is probably going to be added to these pants very soon. I'm going to extend the pockets with this. If they like this pattern and it fits and they're happy with it, I'm going to go through my scraps and pull out anything that they would like and make a bunch more hats for them. So we're going to lay our fabrics out so that I can layer and cut. Now, I do not use my rotary cutter as much as most of you, and I know this is an operator error thing, as my dad would say, but I struggle. I always have problems with it not cutting all the way through. I don't know if I push too hard or not hard enough. I have been sewing since I was 8 years old, and I am in my 50s, so I've been sewing a long time, and I have been using a rotary cutter since high school, which is the 80s, and still struggle. I love a rotary cutter, and I have often layered and cut. It's kind of my favorite, but I have my very ancient Olfa rotary cutter. This is from the 80s. This is from high school with a new blade in it. And then I also have this one. This is, I believe, called Kai. My friend Zelda told me about it. It is a great rotary cutter. Again, it's me, not the cutter. I have issues. All right, so I have my pieces cut out, and I'm going to layer my fabric. This is one that I think fat quarters would be great for. We have 2 pieces to be cut on the fold. If you want this to be reversible, it would be very easy to do. We need 1 little hat piece. I'm tempted to make this whole because it sure would be easier to cut. If it were a whole piece instead of, yes, it would. Okay, I'm gonna quickly make this a whole piece so it's not cut on the fold. I'll be right back after I do that, and then we're gonna layer. Give me a second. Cut my piece wide, and this has, I believe, 3/8 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna just check it. Yep, so we have 3/8 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna slip this one in here. So I'm going to layer my fabrics on here so that I can cut them all at once. I'm going to sew 2 of them just all in white with green bias tape, and then this one I'm going to sew in black with black bias tape. And I'm actually going to serge it in navy. You do not need to serge this, but because I'm using this toweling, overlocking those edges will make them more compressed and not so bulky on the inside. So I am going to go ahead and do that. When you layer and cut like this, the main thing, if you're cutting on the fold like this one is, get that fold edge perfect. You just want everything lined up so you don't end up cutting off your fabric, you know, like your pattern piece is too big and you don't know it because an underneath layer isn't correct. All right, I'm gonna make sure we're straight and tidy on our edges here. These are cotton fabrics, and as you can see, this is overlocked. I overlocked the raw edges, the cut edges of everything, and threw it through the wash. I actually put everything in together. I was a little worried about this one bleeding. Look at how saturated the dye is in it, but it did not. I ran it under the faucet first to see if any dye came out before I stuck it in with the rest. It did not, so I took a chance, threw them all in together, and they did great. So I'm going to cut all my fashion fabrics first, and then I'm going to come back and just cut 3 of the side pieces out of the terry cloth. All right, so here are my layers, and you just need to watch if you have directional fabric. See this pattern piece here, the shape of it. This is the bottom, this is the top, this is the part that gets sewn to the cap, or the top of it. So if you're doing directional, you want to make sure that this is the top of your design and this is the bottom of the design. Mine are not directional other than this one, the flames all go one direction. This piece, because of how my fabric is, I could actually turn it either way, but what I've done is I've turned it so that hopefully it matches just right here at the very front, just the design style right at the very front. I'm cutting 1 on the fold of the side piece and 2 of these cap pieces. Now the pattern comes on the fold. I made it whole so I don't have to relay this out. It's a lot easier to do it this way. And then I'm going to come back and cut 3 more because I have 3 pieces in the toweling or the terry cloth of the side piece only. You could make this reversible, but you could lay the inside fabric different than the outside fabric and easily make it reversible. I could easily put the candy inside the golf tees and we're ready to go, and it would be completely reversible if you don't want to use the toweling. You want to make sure these folds are really lined up well. This is me. I do not know why I have such an issue. You guys watching, tell me what you think I'm doing wrong. I've got brand new blades and everything, but I always have a little thread. It's still faster though than cutting by hand, and it's still not as hard on you to cut by hand 3 layers. Oh, I thought I got it on that one, but I didn't. I did talk to my sister, who is also a sewist, and she also likes the Kai products and uses scissors and other things, so I know it's a good recommendation. All right, we've got our fashion fabric cut out. Now I'm going to lay out my terry cloth. Okay, so the terry cloth is thick enough that I'm not going to try to layer and cut it. I'm just going to move my pattern 3 times to cut my 3 linings for my 3 fabrics. And do be careful. It may be difficult for it to cut through your fabric, but it will have no problem cutting through your skin. I may just go to scissors for this. This also pills and leaves lots of lint, which is one of the reasons why I'm going to overlock it. All right, I'm gonna cut 2 more and I'll meet you over at the sewing machine. All right, I'm going to set this up. I'm going to sort of do assembly line style now. So I'm going to sew my dark fabric first because I have my navy thread on the serger and my black thread already on my sewing machine. Let me turn my machine on. This can be completely done on a sewing machine with a straight stitch. You don't even need a zigzag for this because we're bias binding. So I'm going to go ahead and take all my pieces and match up my colors or my fabric. So here's my golf clubs, here's my racing flames, and here's my Christmas candy. The first thing I'm gonna do, you kind of treat this like 2 hats. So you're going to have 1 hat, and there are notches on here so you can match up your center fronts and so forth. Now we are matching, see this shape? We're matching this longer side is what's going to get sewn. The shorter side is where the bias will go. And you'll notice on the pattern there's seam allowance on this piece. There's only seam allowance on this longer edge because that's the one that gets sewn. The one with the bias, they don't even put seam allowance on it. I'm going to pin all 3 of them together. Now I'm going to actually sew it together on the sewing machine first and then come back and just overlock that edge, mainly because of this toweling to make it a little more compressed. What I'm doing is making a teeny tiny snip where the clip or where the notch would be. So we can line that up. Use your pins or your clips. I have both out. I'm probably going to pin the one that's only fabric and clip the one that has the terry cloth. So you can see how that's just gonna, it matches up great. Because this is a curved shape, you may have a little bit of puckering on the cut edge, but it will meet perfectly where your stitching line is. And that's always, especially when you're new to sewing, it can kind of throw you off. Because you want it just to fit perfectly. It should be like a puzzle, it feels like. Sewing, because we're working with fabric that you manipulate, that isn't the case. So I am pinning this together. And can you see the fullness here along this edge? See, it has a little bit of lettucing or ruffling. That is normal. Because when we go to stitch, it fits perfectly right along the stitching line. The fullness is out here on this outer edge. And this is where I'm going to serge, especially when it comes to the terry cloth. Now the terry cloth is technically a knit fabric and it's probably going to go on even easier than this does. I feel like I've had too much caffeine. My hands are shaking. That's a sign that maybe I need to lay off the caffeine. This is going together so easy. Look at that. All right, so this one is ready to sew, and we're just literally going to sew around this edge. This part here, that's all going to get the bias. So there's the first one. I'm not going to make you watch me do every one of these, but we're going to do the same thing here with the terry cloth. Now this is the one that I'm most concerned about overlocking. I'll make sure I didn't pin that on upside down. I did, guys. I was sitting here pinning this whole thing on upside down. I was like, why is this not fitting the way I expected? Duh. Let's try again. Meet you back here in about 5 minutes after I get these all pinned together or clipped. And we'll start putting it together. See you in a minute. Okay, so I have got 3 little piles. I'm going to start on this one because I already have my threads ready to go, and then I have 2 more that I'll go to white on. The ones without the terry cloth, I'm not even going to serge these. I'm just going to sew these only. And because of how there's a little bit of ease that I showed you before, the side that has the fullness, normally, if there's one side that's fuller than the other, put that side towards the feed dogs. The feed dogs will help ease it in, and it'll just be so much easier. And for me, that's the cap side, so I'm actually going to sew it. So the side pieces are going to be on top. The little top of the cap is going to be on the bottom. And we're just going to go around 3/8 of an inch. I've got my straight stitch foot on. I'm going to set my stitch length to about just under 3, 2.9 I think. I want a firm stitch, but I don't want it too tight. And we're ready to go. Right sides together, don't forget to backstitch. All right, so here's the first one. Just going to flip it around so you see, and I am going to press these before I stitch them to each other, so you can kind of see this is it. This is how basic it is. I'm going to do the same thing for this one, but I'm going to flip it over because I have found that the terry cloth stretches more than the stable woven, and it eases in better for the terry cloth side, so they're going to get sewn differently each time. And then this one, I'm going to go ahead and overlock around those edges just because of the fraying and to make it nice and compressed. All right. I'm now going to come over to the sewing machine, no, to the overlock, and I'm just going to go, first though, I'm just going to make sure I don't have any bubbles or anything. Now this is going to be on the inside where you won't see it. Okay, it's ready to go. So I'm just going to go around that outer edge. I just have 3 threads on here. It's strictly to compress that edge and keep it from pilling and fraying. That is done. I'm going to go ahead and go over to my iron real quick, and I'm just going to give these a gentle press to make everything lay nice and flat so that I can put them together. So I'll be right back. Let me give this a quick press. Pressing adds so much to your project, whatever it is. So here is the inside of the project pressed, and I pressed this one. I'm pressing my seam allowances opposite. So this one I've sort of pressed the seam allowance out towards the side, and on the one that's the inside, I pressed it inside towards the little round cap area. So here they are, very lovely. Now we're going to put wrong sides together for this next part. So I'm going to take this flat edge and we're going to line up straight across, wrong sides together. You can base this at the sewing machine, you can serge it together, whatever you want to do. We're going to cover that edge with bias. I think I'm going to serge my edge together mainly because of this terry cloth. It just will fray less and make it compressed. It doesn't have to be done, and I'm sort of vacillating on whether or not I really want to do that. You could also completely skip that step and just put your bias over it and stitch it. It is easier to work with if you have it clipped together in some way. This is the back opening. It has like a little opening. This is where we're going to cover with bias first. And I have my seam allowances going opposite directions on the inside. And that just offsets those seam allowances, makes it a little flatter. You can, if you want to put a tag in these, I was considering it, I would definitely put a tag like back here on the back, inside the bias, which I'll show you in a minute. I don't know if I'm going to though. Okay, so we're just putting this right now. The thing that matters is just this one straight edge. I think I'll go ahead and just serge it just because of this fabric. So I'm going to serge across this flat edge, and then I think I'll go ahead and just serge around the circle too. So I'm going to go ahead and keep pinning. It'll make it flat. It'll make it not fray. It'll just make life easy. You could also just baste it. You could also completely skip it if you feel comfortable and just start adding the bias. I personally like to marry the two first. If you are sewing for someone who has to wear masks all the time, it's very easy to add a little button to this so that their mask can go onto the button instead of onto their ear. I know a lot of people in the medical field prefer that. It's just, by the end of the day, it's more comfortable than having the mask pull on their ears all the time. I did not ask if they would want a button, but I might add a button. Have to give a check and see. Okay, I'm going to text them real quick and ask about that, and then I will serge around. All right, we're ready to serge. I'm going to serge across this flat part first, and then I'm going to come back and go around the curvy part, and then we will add bias, and we will have one cap done. Serged across the back. It does make it nice and tight and compressed and smooth. It'll make it easy to go and add our bias to it. All right, so it's now a cap. You can see it goes on like this. We'll put the bias on so it'll tie. Because it's open in the back, it makes it a little more adjustable. All right, now, sitting here editing, and I realized the clip I took of me putting the bias across the back opening, you just open up the cap and go straight across the flat piece, is missing. Like I obviously did something wrong in the recording. I have a little snippet of just sort of a close-up. I'll show it here, but you're going to just put bias across the back opening of the hat. You open it up and lay it flat. It's a nice straight piece. I want to say it's like 9 inches long, something like that, just across the back, and then we come back and cross it with the tie piece that goes all the way around the hat. So that's what's missing. That's what you're doing right here. So it's this piece right here. We put this piece on first before we cross it with these, and that is the piece of film that's missing. So we're going to just stitch this on real quick. I have the measurements from their personal cap, and they have 9 inch of bias that hangs off the back that they tie with. So I want to make sure I have 9 inches before I start pinning it on. And we need to decide, what do we want to do with this raw edge? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up that raw edge and turn it back on itself, and I'm going to stitch it and then fold it back in, and that is going to finish off that edge. So I have taken my bias and I'm opening it up. I want to be able to have this edge finished instead of raw. It's going to get washed a lot. And so I'm opening up my bias, turning it back on itself, and I'm going to stitch it just a little bit, just a short little stitch. So that it's self-enclosed. So now you can see that turns back on itself. We can fold that back in. And now we have a finished, I'm going to trim a little bit, that's too thick. Let's give it a little trim. Fold that first, fold again, it all goes inside. Whoop. All right, now that is completely finished off. See, nice and finished off. And now I can start pinning it onto my cap. And I need 9 inches hang off. So here's my 9-inch mark. And when we're doing this, you want to pin, this is black so it's hard to see, but usually one side of the bias is a little shorter than the other, and that's the one that's going to go on top. Here's my 9 inches hanging off and my pin, so now I know where to start. Okay, so we're just going to go around like that, and then we're going to start at the end of our tail and stitch all the way around. I'm going to also do this little enclosure on the other side. Now, if you want to stick a tag in it, it would be really easy to tuck it in the back of the bias in one of these areas. Here's my tag. You could easily tuck it into the bias and just stitch over it on the inside if you wanted to have a tag inside your project. Whoop. Going to show you I'm starting to pull over, so I'm going to stop and fix that real quick before I move on. Okay, we're back in business. As you can see the bias, I'm going to give it a haircut. just finished going around, and one thing of bias will do 2 hats plus a little scrap, so very economical. All right, I'm gonna give them haircuts. We are completely done with 3 hats. And I will put the time up of the actual sew time because when I'm filming, it takes longer than just if you were sitting at home doing it on your own. But look at how cute these hats turned out. Okay, let me give you a few close-ups of these and we're done with this project. Okay, so here are the 3 hats done, and you can see the terry cloth lining on the inside, fully lined. They look really nice. If you didn't want to do terry cloth lining, you could easily make these reversible because of the bias binding. These are a very fast, super easy scrap busting project. One package of bias will do 2 hats. They only take a half a yard. Actually, a half a yard would get you a couple hats. You could probably get 2 to 3 hats out of a half a yard. Okay, I've tied one on. Spin around so you can see the back, the little ties. Now, if you've ever used the decorative fold over elastic, you could use that instead of the bias, and you actually could use it so that you stretch it a little bit and it pulls in the hat. If you want to make the hat a little more adjustable in size, you can kind of see the little pook back here, which is actually how it should be so that you can make it fit. It fits great. And if I need it, I haven't heard back yet, but they may want buttons on the side. You would do the buttons right above the ears back here. And then when they wear their masks, you can hook the mask onto the buttons instead of on the ears, and it just protects the ears. So that's a very easy thing to add. When it's a simple project like this, it's easy to zhuzh it up with the fabric, embroidery, fun things like that. You can also get, the bias comes in like checks and polka dots and all kinds of things too. Thanks for sewing with me, and I'll see you next week for another fun video.